Hi everyone, this is to go with the PowerPoint introducing that mixed media tonal piece. It's just a great drawing task where there's so much you can unpack and explicitly teach in the lead up and during that project. So just a refresher, if those are needed or if you're a newbie, this might be helpful. So bigger picture, when you're thinking of a sequence, I just think of simple before you get more complicated, and generally black and white before I move into colour, and just more simpler materials before I get into more complicated and messier materials. So I generally start with pencil work and black and white before I move into working with paint, mixing things up. And also for the fun factor, it's hard when you've introduced working with paint, working on canvas, for example, then to go back to get kids to be drawing with pencils. Seems logical to me. So excuse the messy marks on my page, I've had to do a take two. So there's little ghosting lines there, just ignore those. But even with your starting, I would even go right back to, as on the PowerPoint, your pencil types, particularly with year 7s. I introduce the little codes on the pencils that H is for hard, so they're lighter and a harder pencil, so they're great for doing more crisp lines and doing your ghosting, your guidelines to get started before you commit adding detail and shading. Whereas your Bs get softer and harder. So the higher the number with the B, the softer and harder they get. So they're the good ones for shading. So in our classroom, we go up to 6B, which is great for getting some really dark areas. And if you're getting serious, as a full range goes up to 9B, I think. But I'd get kids even just have a practice of that so they're getting familiar. So like the task sheet on the PowerPoint, you can make up something like that or use that one. Maybe give them with a space to work in. The kids can have a play just to get a feel of what type of mark they can make with that pencil, how dark they can go compared to, that was my HB. 6B is a lot thicker and I can get some really nice dark tones from really getting into my shadings. Look at that beautiful one. So I'd go right back to those basics, even just your pencil types before we move on. So I generally tell the students that my sort of 2B, 3B is my go-to, and you get quite a range with that. But when, like I said, you're getting more serious with this shading, up to your 6B or what your classroom's got for the really dark areas. And your HBs are just good for your ghosting lines and getting started. So we have a little catchphrase of keep it light till you get it right. And also it's easier to rub out before you commit. So the enlarging with the grid's just a great skill. And it's sort of an empowering kind of skill. You might even link it to mention some of the masters from hundreds of years ago, how they used it to upscale for doing big mural-sized paintings on the walls. So it's a great little thing to get a grasp of. So the elephant on the example on the PowerPoint, I get kids to get some scrap paper, so they use it like a viewfinder. So just so you're physically cutting off those distractions so you're not getting overwhelmed at the full picture. And I'm always encouraging them to trust the process, to taking one bit at a time. So as long as I've got the same amount of squares, I'm just going by proportions. So I get the kids to look at this and think, well, that's basically halfway. So I can put a little mark on my page for halfway, and that one's probably a bit below halfway. Like I said, I had to do a retake, that's why I've got some messy marks there. So just ignore those. And I can kind of connect those together. So just one square at a time, looking at proportions. So it's a great observational skill to learn. It's a bit less than halfway again. Maybe you could say that's coming over just over a third. So I'll do some little ghosting lines before I commit and start to draw some of those up. But I basically look at where lines are coming in and out of the boxes. Again, it's around a third of the way, maybe a little bit higher. That one's nice and in the corner. So the thickness of these lines, we can worry about those details later, making that look good. Just starting off, again, keep it light till you get it right, but just one square at a time, and getting kids to get those observational skills going of just looking at where they're halfway, a third of the way across. That eye's about halfway. So they can make little marks and build some confidence. And just another great transferable skill they can use again. On the 8th slide, I've got a bit of example of cross-hatching. Again, I explicitly teach some of that. So normally I get the kids to gather up the front so they can see a little better, and I might even still use an easel. Often when I'm demonstrating, I'll use charcoal just because it's bigger and quicker so they can see it on something a bit fiddly. Obviously doing a small bit of cross hatching is going to be hard to see, but if it's working on a big bit of paper on an easel and using charcoal, they can gather around and see what you're doing. So I have examples to show what you can be done with it, the potential, but also trying to simplify up close. It really is just a series of parallel lines. So my demonstration, I just show them that, again, with charcoal on a big bit of paper. And I get them to have a go at this afterwards, just in pencil, but also with the goal of getting a gradation of tones, trying to get from lighter to darker. So just trussing on a different angle and a third angle, starting to build that up. So again, it's quite messy, and I do it purposely big on a big scale where it's quite messy, so it's not intimidating. Just showing up close, it's as simple as that. But I give some examples to show then where you can actually go with it and the precision that you can get, and you can get some nice realistic stuff if you're a neat sort of person. And also talk about contour lines. So my example, that was a carrot, beautiful carrot. Instead of using straight lines, anything that's round or curved, I encourage them to use curved lines, so it emphasises the illusion that you're trying to make it look 3D rather than flattening things out. It's my apple. So again, rather than using straight lines, using a curved object, because it's like a sphere. I encourage that round line's going to add to the illusion that it's a round object and making it look 3D. Might have some straight cross hatching for the shadow. But just explicitly breaking down some of those things, and as you go through a project like this, you might do it, introduce something new each lesson, depending on how your lessons are structured and how long they go for. So maybe each double or one per week you might be introducing a new medium. So the next one might be going into the collage one or the inky one. So I'll just move on to a bit of charcoal. So for the areas on the mixed media piece, I basically give the kids a little demo and just a chance to practice it before they do it on the real deal. So aiming for something that doesn't take too long. So for the charcoal example, I've given them a handout, and it'll just have a handout with a little outline of a tree, just the trunk of the tree. Again, just a confidence thing, so it doesn't take too long, but they've got something to start with, and then they can just add in the foliage is my plan. But I talk about the differences between willow charcoal being nice and soft and smudgy. Comes in long sticks, but I tend to break it off. And kids can have a scribble, use it on its side. Whereas the real charcoal was more dense and darker, so I can get a true black. So again, I start with the willow. Again, it's a bit like the theory of keep it light so you get it right. And then for my really darker tones of shading, I can go to proper charcoal or even a black pastel, chalk pastel. In the trunk, we can try a bit of shading in there, trying to go from dark to light. If I'm doing shading, I just pick a side and then stick to it. So in this case, everything on the left's got some shadow. I've done this a bit small, so it's a bit fiddly for charcoal. But these guys are a game changer. They're called paper stumps. A bit out of focus. Just see if we can get that camera to focus a bit better. There we go. Paper stumps. It's just made from compressed paper. So there's nothing wrong with smudging with your fingers, and I tell the students that. But these guys just give you a bit more control. So something like this is a bit small and fiddly. If I'm smudging with this, I can still keep a nice crisp edge right on the edge of my tree there. I can push the charcoal up to the line, but then I can also drag it out. So I could do that with my finger, but usually I'm going to go over those lines and it gets a bit messy. But with this I can keep that nice crisp line. and blend that across. So these are also another great confidence booster for kids. Just to blend their shadow. So for grey lead or pencil, get fancy and do a little bit of roots of the tree there. They're very, very cool. But I guess get kids to practice basically just comparing willow charcoal, doing a suggestion of some foliage, clumps of branches. And if they want, they can smudge again. That's all with willow charcoal at the moment. If you want some really blacks, I can come back in with the compressed, the real deal charcoal. And a couple of branches maybe. So I don't want them spending too long on top, because otherwise this project can drag on forever. But just something to keep a quick practice using different types of charcoal, again, just seeing what marks they can make, a bit of mark making practice before they try it on their mixed media piece. So just to make more on using that paper stump, I should actually keep one separate, one for charcoal and one for pencil ideally, because you can't actually sharpen them. Kids always make the mistake. This gets very dirty and they'll put in a sharpener and it just ruins them because they unravel. So I just teach them on a scrap bit of paper, as best you can, push it back to a point. But generally a bit of dirt on there is kind of good and good for getting your light shadow areas. But just to compare to a pencil version, again, I'd still work contour-ish, just to emphasise the roundness. This is another very rushed apple. But the beauty of those smudging sticks, paper stumps, they just make everything look better. So you can see that's very rushed. But if I use my smudging stick, I can drag that round. Everything's softened off. Like I said, once they're dirty, I find that a bit of a bonus. I can use some of those subtle shadows up here maybe. It's not looking too shabby. Shadow underneath. I don't have to be the neatest in the world, but paper stump will make everything look good. I can blend that out. So it's just smudging, like with your finger, but the fact that you've got a point means I can get that right up to the line. I've got some control over it. Some beautiful shading.